Coming up on Tech News Weekly, Jason, Howell, and I have got a show for you, folks. We are digging into some complex topics this week, and we are understanding them by way of our awesome guests. Up first, Emily Birnbaum of Protocol joins us to talk about this Facebook antitrust lawsuit, or should I say lawsuits. There are a number of charges being brought against Facebook, and Emily helps us understand what in the world is going on. Then we talk to Joanna Nelius of Gizmodo about SpaceX's Starlink. What is happening with internet coming to these countries in hard-to-reach places? What is the FCC's role in all of this? And what in the world, or should I say where in the world, is Starlink going to be? Then we round things out with an excellent conversation with Sam Abuelsamid of the Wheel Bearings podcast to talk about Uber sort of, kind of, maybe getting out of the automated driving business and focusing more on what it does best, delivery of people and delivery of goods. It's all that plus our stories of the week on Tech News Weekly. Tech News Weekly is brought to you from TWiT's LastPass Studios. Securing every access point in your company doesn't have to be a challenge. LastPass unifies access and authentication to make securing your employees simple and secure, even when they're working remotely. Check out lastpass.com/twit to learn more.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 162, recorded Thursday, December 10th, 2020. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Melissa. Like expired milk, 30% of your customers' data goes bad every year. That's money down the drain. Visit Melissa's developer portal for free access to data quality APIs, demos, and code samples. Freshen up your sour data today with 1,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit.
And by ExpressVPN. Stop letting people keep logs of what you do online and protect your online privacy with just one click. For 3 extra months free with a 1-year package, go to expressvpn.com/TNW.
And by LastPass. Don't wait until the end of the year to get strong security. Start solidifying your cybersecurity strategy with the award-winning LastPass today. Go to lastpass.com/twit to find out how they can help you.
Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I am one of your hosts, Mikah Sargent.
I am the other one, Jason Howell. And holy cow, talk about breaking news. Well, it's not really breaking news, but breaking the tech world news is all this stuff with Facebook.
Yeah, this is wild. This is something that maybe personally I had a little bit of like, but I don't quite understand everything that's going on. And so I thought we could bring in somebody to help us understand everything that's going on. So I'm excited to welcome back Emily Birnbaum from Protocol to give us a run through. Welcome back to the show, Emily.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Yes, we appreciate you. So let us kick things off. Facebook is in the midst of a quite the debacle right now because the of course multiple states and the FTC have said, hey, you know, we've really got an antitrust issue here with you, and things aren't looking great. Let's talk about the cases, because there are multiple cases, a whole bunch of cases. And kind of, if you can for us, Emily, can you explain sort of an umbrella or top-down look at what exactly kind of all of these cases are trying to say about Facebook and what the concern is here?
Yeah, so 46 states plus DC and Guam, as well as the Federal Trade Commission yesterday, both filed separate but twin lawsuits against Facebook. the broad contours of both of their cases are very similar. And ultimately, we can expect they'll be consolidated into one giant case. And they're basically saying that Facebook for years has engaged in a pattern of anti-competitive conduct. So they have used their dominant position in the marketplace of quote unquote personal social networking to elbow out competitors, to buy up potential rivals, including, and most importantly, Instagram and WhatsApp. So a lot of these cases revolve around why they bought Instagram, why they bought WhatsApp. Was that to stifle a potential competitor? If so, that's a violation of U.S. antitrust law. And, the remedies they have set out could go so far as to ultimately, break up Facebook. The government could force Facebook to unwind the Instagram and WhatsApp mergers, but that is probably years off.
Yeah, we know that this is a thing that's going to take a lot of time, but I am kind of curious, looking through this and kind of seeing these cases. Was it Instagram and WhatsApp that drew this attention in the first place? Or are we looking at a situation where these different groups are kind of going, okay, we know there's an antitrust concern, and these are the actions we can take to help undo these antitrust issues? So basically, I'm wondering, did Instagram and WhatsApp, as the idea of pulling them away from Facebook, did that come afterward, or was it the purchase of Instagram and WhatsApp that really sparked this antitrust lawsuit?
Well, there's actually a tension at the center of this. The FTC, which is suing Facebook today, approved both the acquisitions of Instagram and WhatsApp in 2012 and 2014 respectively, and so at that time they said this is fine. There was obviously internal dissent, there was external pressure, but they okayed those deals. And now about a year ago they initiated an antitrust investigation into Facebook's dominance broadly. They looked at all sorts of questions around their business, around their power and how they exert that power in markets, and they came back to these acquisitions. So it's kind of interesting, a meandering path, but just because the government said okay before, it doesn't mean that they can't retroactively unwind those mergers and say, actually, it turned out there was an issue here. So when you're an antitrust attorney, you really, really have to look at what is possible under the law. And so they brought a case that in many ways it's unprecedented. There are some pretty novel theories of harm in the case, but ultimately it's a pretty straightforward antitrust case. You are not allowed to buy up rivals in order to stifle competition, potential rivals in order to stifle competition. So it's probably a mixture. They probably brought this because it's their strongest case and because there's genuine concerns around these acquisitions.
I think what's, you mentioned earlier, just a few minutes ago, about how long, or about the fact that this is likely to last a long time. I know the Microsoft antitrust case, what did that go on, like 21 years or something, before it finally reached some sort of resolution. And I mean, this, has the potential to be on the same level of that. In many ways, Facebook kind of feels like the Microsoft of yesterday, as far as this antitrust story is concerned. What I'm curious about is, all right, so Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, they're all intertwined, and that's kind of at the core of what these cases are scratching at, let's say. If this is going to take such a long time, those services are going to integrate even deeper into Facebook over time. Is that going to be even more difficult to unwind down the line, whenever it may be? Or maybe it gets to a point to where an Instagram isn't even a thing anymore because Facebook's moved on to the next shiny object. Who the heck knows? It's a long enough time horizon that could be the case. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think last year Facebook raised a lot of eyebrows because they announced that they were going to be embarking on a mission to, make their messaging across these three powerful platforms interoperable. You're going to be able to message someone from Instagram to Facebook Blue, and that process has brought the services together more closely than ever. I mean, there's actual engineering happening, and it's going to be very hard to disentangle those things. So as of right now, I think reporters have posed the question, are you going to have to stop that process? Are you going to have to stop integrating further and further? And Facebook has kind of dodged the question, or they've said, we don't know. It's actually possible that, ultimately over the course of this case, there could be some sort of injunction that would force Facebook to stop that process, but we're not there yet. We're not even really close to there yet. So it's sort of yet to be seen, but there are levers the government could pull if that's a real question and concern. I mean, if you're Facebook right now, you don't want to take any, you don't want to make any sudden movements. You want to do anything too huge. You are under the most aggressive the most aggressive spotlight that you could possibly be under. So sort of yet to be seen.
Yeah, indeed. And then, of course, we have the fact that, President-elect Joe Biden is coming into his term next month, barring any unforeseen circumstances. And so in a Biden, is there any impact of let's say a Biden presidency on how this plays out, on whether there are even more charges leveled on this going forward? Does it impact it in your view?
Well, I think what's so interesting is actually the cases we have before us, which are extremely aggressive, have been promoted by the most progressive advocates out there. Some of these theories, there are from a bipartisan coalition of states, nearly every state, if you look at it, and a bipartisan group of commissioners at the FTC. So, the Republican chairman, along with two of the Democrats. So I think a Biden administration has pledged to take on corporate power, has pledged to act more aggressively against monopolies than, for instance, Obama did even. So I think that the Biden administration has an opportunity to make this as broad as possible. The Biden administration has a lot of incentives not to settle early. So I think it's sort of a promise that the case will continue.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And we will certainly, I was producing another show on the network this week in Google yesterday, and Leo brought up the whole 21 years of Microsoft, antitrust case, and just realizing that literally we are on day 2 of this journey. We are going to be talking about this for not weeks, not months, but most likely years. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out, especially with the scale and the scope of so many different entities kind of charging Facebook with the same thing, and to see how this trickles down to even other companies who might be under the spotlight, like you mentioned. Maybe Apple or Microsoft. Sorry, not Microsoft. Google. Other companies could potentially, be impacted by how this goes as well. So,
yeah, I mean, the DOJ obviously last month sued Google under very different antitrust charges, but using the same laws. And that's another case that's going to drag on forever, and that's going to change the landscape of the tech industry for years to come. So we also do know that the government is investigating Amazon and Apple, and we don't know where that'll go yet, but this could set some important precedents.
All right. Well, Emily, really appreciate you hopping on again with us. We love having you on the show and appreciate your time. Emily Birnbaum writes for Protocol. That's protocol.com. Emily, if people want to follow you online, where can they find you?
Birnbaum_E on Twitter. Thanks so much.
Right on. Emily, take care of yourself. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
All right. It's possible you can hear my dog barking outside, which means it's time to take a break. Before we do, I just want to let you know, up next, Elon Musk's Starlink, is kind of in the news today. They are looking to liberate rural areas from broadband hell, basically, and they're getting a grant in order to do so. We're going to talk about that. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Melissa. If you've ever forgotten to check the date on a carton of milk, then you know that it's very easy for that milk to go bad, right? To go sour. Well, like milk, your customer data goes bad. In fact, up to 30% of customer data goes bad every year. And Melissa makes sure that your data is accurate and current so that you continue to reach the right customers. It makes sure that your data doesn't go bad anymore. Their tools have helped businesses maintain fresh data for over 35 years. So you aren't throwing money down the drain with bad data. You can verify addresses, emails, phone numbers, names, all in real time with Melissa. So it's kind of like magic. It's working in the moment. Melissa's global address verification service verifies addresses for more than 240 countries and territories at the point of entry. So there's no lag, there's no delay. You just get that right then. This ensures that only valid billing and shipping addresses are captured and used in your systems. You can identify your customers and really just kind of get to know them. You can add consumer demographic information to your records, such as property and mortgage data, even things like marital status or social media handles. Very, very useful. Melissa's flexible deployment options offer different platforms to suit any preference, any business size, or even any budget. With flexible on-premise, web service, secure FTP processing, and software as a service delivery options, you can choose the best way to meet your unique business needs. And Melissa continually undergoes independent security audits just to reinforce their commitment to data security, to privacy and compliance requirements. They have the utmost dedication to your data's security by implementing strong controls and safeguards when processing your data. So SOC 2, HIPAA compliant, GDPR compliant. Over 10,000 businesses trust the address experts. And with the holiday season right around the corner, it's time to take control of your customer data. So you can trust Melissa to be your foundation for data-driven success. Melissa is supporting communities and qualifying essential workers during COVID-19. So you can see if your organization qualifies for 6 months of free service by applying online. Don't put up with sour customer contact data. Try Melissa's APIs in the developer portal. It's super easy to log in. You can just sign up right there and start playing in the API sandbox anytime, 24/7. Get started today with 1,000 records cleaned for free. All you got to do is go to melissa.com/twit. That's melissa.com/twit. And we thank Melissa for their support of Tech News Weekly. All right, Elon Musk has grand visions of how SpaceX's Starlink is going to open up broadband internet to the country's hardest to reach places. The FCC actually thinks Starlink is onto something, but Starlink has its issues. And joining us to talk about Starlink is Joanna Nelius from Gizmodo. Welcome to the show, Joanna. It's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me. Really excited.
Yeah, right on. I appreciate your time. So let's talk a little bit about the Starlink. Every once in a while I hear about it and think of the promise of this, especially for really hard to reach areas, maybe areas that people are relying on satellite internet, which satellite internet hasn't always been the most dependable or the highest quality. You make some serious sacrifices with satellite internet. Starlink, of course, promises to change that, to improve that experience. But before we get into Starlink and why, what it does right and what it does not so right, let's talk a little bit about the news that's happened this week. Starlink was awarded almost $900 million in FCC subsidies. What exactly is the goal of the FCC's Rural Digital Opportunity Fund?
So basically, the goal of the fund is to provide however many internet service providers as possible with federal grant money to close the digital divide in America. So basically, any underserved or unserved rural population in the United States, this fund will hypothetically help internet providers give people without high-speed internet high-speed internet. And these funds will be rolled out to all of these providers over the next 10 years. So it will be a very slow rollout. But hopefully with companies like SpaceX's Starlink, even Cox and Comcast and any other big or small ISP in America, as a collective, they will all be able to bridge the digital divide just a little bit more.
Which is just incredibly important. Yes. And we're really noticing that, especially right now, right? With the last year, so much is happening out of the home. If you don't have access to that broadband, you're really left behind if you weren't before. What are the terms then attached to this? I mean, it sounds like a slow rollout, but there's got to be some requirements as far as how this is managed and how this is spent by companies like Starlink. What are those terms like?
Mm-hmm. Well, to put it simply, as long as the companies are rolling out the internet to X amount of census blocks like they agreed to when they took the money, then they will, continue to get that money, a portion of it over the next 10 years. The companies kind of get to decide how they want to roll it out. All the FCC does is tell them, okay, you must have X amount completed by this date, otherwise you don't get money. So it's not only is the government putting a lot of trust into these companies to do everything that they promise that they will do over the next 10 years, but it also puts the entire consumer base like kind of at the mercy of all these companies to keep the promise as well.
Okay. So then you've got a company like SpaceX's Starlink. Like how necessary was something like this for the greater ambitions of Starlink in particular? Like what kind of a direct impact is this going to have for Starlink going forward? Like I'm sure they had plans to kind of do a lot of this anyways. How does this improve those plans?
Well, it gives them the funds they need to roll it out faster. On the Starlink website, they have a very ambitious promise to roll out Starlink across the entire globe just within the next year. So having this chunk of money over the next 10 years will help them build out more and more of that promise. And in satellite in general, I mean, it's a lot quicker to roll out, especially with the success that SpaceX has been having with its Falcon 9 rockets. They just, strap some satellites, shoot it into, low orbit around the Earth, and they can just kind of pop those up there. They have the goal of putting 12,000 satellites into space. So having this money rolled out even on a year-by-year basis is going to help them put more and more of that tech up in space and build out their network. The only thing that they have to worry about is the cost of the home equipment and how people are going to be able to afford that. But yeah, there's no digging trenches and laying cable like you would see with traditional wired service. It would just not be instantaneous, but it would be a lot quicker to get up and going.
Yeah. How does a Starlink, like the Starlink approach, compare to what's already out there and already serving some of these rural areas? Of course, they have access to some satellite internet options, but Starlink is obviously a step up. In what ways?
So because they orbit the Earth at a lower height than traditional satellites do, they're able to not only provide faster bandwidth speeds, but also lower latency. So if somebody is connecting to the internet through a Starlink satellite, it isn't going to take as long for their signal to get to the satellite and bounce back just because of where the satellites are physically located in Earth's orbit. Satellite companies like HughesNet and Viasat, they have much larger satellites in a much higher orbit around Earth that are stationary. So kind of one pro about that is they don't have to continuously rotate around the Earth like Starlink's do, because they don't have to worry about them falling out of orbit. But with those satellites being much further away from Earth than Starlink's, you're going to have lower bandwidth, higher latency speeds. So that's just kind of some of the pros and cons.
And then you wrote a piece, this was about a month ago, but you really dove into Starlink and the technology and the approach that SpaceX is putting into Starlink. Yes, there are pros to Starlink. There are also some serious downsides. You talk about some of the shortcomings of Starlink. How is this system limited when you compare it to the other offerings out there, to the other satellite internet providers?
Absolutely. So with Starlink, because they stay in a low Earth orbit, they have to constantly rotate around the Earth. Otherwise, they risk falling out of Earth's orbit. And if that happens, then they can't be used for internet service. They're basically kind of dead in the water. So they would either have to figure out a way to bring it back into Earth's orbit. And if they can't, they would have to launch a new satellite up to replace that. So that could be problematic in the future, considering Starlink wants to launch up to 12,000 satellites. And we're already kind of seeing the effects of that with satellite pollution.
Right.
Astronomers, when they tried to get a clear shot of that comet that went over Earth just a few months ago, you could see the comet in the picture, but there was this nice trail of Starlink satellites kind of obscuring that view. So there's stuff that won't necessarily direct the end consumer too much, but for scientists who are doing, research work like that, or even with the problem of space junk, launching more satellites up into orbit, to get your global internet system up and running. It's a really, really great ambition, but there's also serious questions in terms of what is that going to mean for the Earth's atmosphere in years to come. Not to mention, Starlink is still in beta. It hasn't ever been used to scale. And while people who are in the beta are reporting really, really great speeds and low latency, there's still questions about if Starlink will be able to keep that once more and more people are getting hooked up to its network. What customers of HughesNet and Viasat often see is the more people that are trying to connect to one satellite, the less bandwidth there is to go around. So for the same, kind of the same way that it works in your home, the more people that are trying to connect to your wireless connection on different devices, the less bandwidth there is for each device. So that is something that will potentially affect the end users of Starlink if there are too many people trying to get connected to one satellite or even a few.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Yeah. You've got a wonderful write-up that folks should check out at gizmodo.com. Just do a search for Joanna Nelius. Joanna, if people want to find you and follow you online, where can they do so?
So I am on Twitter and Instagram, both at JLN Writes, WRITES. Give me a follow. Love to chat internet anytime. Yeah, if you have questions, I am more than happy to respond.
Right on. Thank you so much for hopping on with us today, Joanna. It's been a pleasure. We'll talk to you soon. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure too.
All right. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Joanna. Up next, is Uber getting out of the self-driving car game? We'll answer that. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by ExpressVPN. I do love ExpressVPN. So there's a little story here. Earlier this year, more than 100 Twitter users got their accounts hacked. Passwords, email addresses, phone numbers, and more all were taken from high-profile people. These kinds of attacks are getting more frequent and more severe, and it's not just Twitter. Facebook, eBay, Uber, Adobe, and Yahoo have leaked data such as passwords, credit card info, and driver's licenses belonging to billions of users. And ExpressVPN can help you safeguard your personal data online. According to recent reports, hackers can make up to $1,000 from selling someone's personal information on the dark web, making people like me and you easy, lucrative targets. ExpressVPN is an app that funnels your data through a secure, encrypted tunnel so that no matter what device you use and no matter where you're connecting, you can have peace of mind every time you use the internet. The app connects with just one click. It's lightning fast, and the best part is ExpressVPN works on up to 5 devices simultaneously, so you and your whole family can stay protected. If a breach can happen to powerful individuals, it can easily happen to you. Protect yourself with ExpressVPN, the VPN rated #1 by CNET, Wired, and countless others. I've talked before about how I use ExpressVPN. Love it. It is fantastic. It's fast. I pretty much have it turned on all the time. And like I said, sometimes I forget. I'll go, oh, no, I need to turn on that. Oh, wait, it's already on. I didn't even realize because of how quick it works. And if you visit expressvpn.com/TNW right now, you can arm yourself with an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. That's EXPRESSVPN.com/TNW. Visit expressvpn.com/TNW to learn more. Thanks so much to ExpressVPN for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly and, of course, for supporting the TWiT network. All right, folks. You know, Uber is maybe, I don't know, in the business of self-driving vehicles. And that may be changing because Uber has decided to sell off its automated driving unit, sort of. I have very little understanding of how this all works, but I am excited to say that we have Sam Abuelsamid here, of course, of the Wheel Bearings podcast, to talk to us today about what in the world is going on with Uber. Hello and welcome back to the show, Sam.
Hello again, Micah and Jason. How are you guys doing today?
Peachy keen, thank you. So let's get into this because, as I said, it's kind of when I first heard that they were selling it off, it sounded like, oh, you know, they're completely getting out of things. But as I read this Forbes article, I came to understand that they're sort of selling it off, but at the same time, they're more just kind of pushing money into Aurora. So can you explain how this works? I thought when you sell something, you make money off of it, but they're kind of putting money into the place where they've sold it. So how does this work?
Well, if you've ever sold a house in a down market, you know that you don't always make money off of something when you sell it. In the case of Uber's ATG, their Advanced Technology Group, they had a product that nobody really wanted to buy. From the conversations I've had over the past week, they've been offering up ATG to a number of potential buyers or hope for customers for some time now, and nobody wanted it. So what's happened here is that Aurora, which is the company that was founded by Chris Urmson, who who's the original leader of the Google self-driving car project, Sterling Anderson, who led the early development of Tesla's autopilot, and Drew Bagnell, who used to be at Uber, they have their own AV company, and they are acquiring ATG, 100% of ATG, from Uber in an all-stock deal. So Aurora is not paying any cash for this. They're giving stock to ATG's current shareholders, which are Uber. They owned the majority of ATG, as well as Toyota, Denso, a Japanese supplier, and SoftBank, who owned a stake in it as well. So those companies are all getting Aurora stock, and in exchange, Aurora gets ATG, plus Uber is also investing another $400 million into Aurora. So Uber is going to end up owning about 26% of Aurora. And I think that's actually the key to this whole deal. One of the things we've seen over the course of this past year or so is a lot of companies in the AV space have been having trouble raising more money, which they've had to do because the development of automated driving has taken a lot longer than anybody thought, and they're not getting revenue yet, so they have to raise more capital. And we've seen a couple of companies go under. Zoox got acquired by Amazon. And so I think that $400 million that Aurora is getting as part of this deal is the key to what made them decide to take on ATG.
Mm-hmm. I mean, as you say, or as Aurora kind of points out, yeah, there aren't many players in this space that are going to be successful. And so there does seem to be this sort of consolidation as folks are sort of dropping out of the race there. Okay, now we're going to put our resources into this. We're going to put our resources into this and these few companies. I mean, one of the things that I found interesting was that Aurora is kind of made up of people from other companies. Can you talk about the leadership at Aurora and how that has changed, or whether that was kind of the thing from the start? Who is in charge at Aurora and kind of what's their pedigree, so to speak? Where did they come from before that?
Yeah, so the CEO at Aurora is a guy named Chris Urmson, as I mentioned earlier. Chris, he started off at Carnegie Mellon University. He led the Carnegie Mellon team that participated in the DARPA Grand Challenge program back 15, 17 years ago now, almost, and led the team that won the Urban Challenge component of that in 2007. So he's an early pioneer in this modern automated driving space. And after Carnegie Mellon, he went on to work at Google, and he led the Google self-driving car project from 2009 until it became Waymo in 2016. At which point after that he left and started up Aurora with Sterling Anderson, who he was the director of the autopilot program at Tesla, the original autopilot program, and Drew Bagnell, who was at Uber early on as well. So, these guys all have a lot of experience with automated driving, developing automated driving systems. They know how to do this, and they have put together a really good team there. And one of the challenges in acquiring ATG, whenever you have an acquisition like this, there's one of the big challenges for any company making an acquisition is merging the corporate cultures. And when you look at Aurora, Chris worked with Anthony Lewandowski, who you guys have talked about in the past. Lewandowski was the guy who left Google, started his company Otto, sold that to Uber, and then was later accused of stealing thousands of technical documents from Google on his way out the door. And he's now going to prison for that. And one of the things that Aurora's values that they have published on their website is, no jerks. They don't want anybody coming into the company who, is going to be a problem to work with. They want everybody to collaborate and work together. And as we all know, Uber's had a problematic relationship with rules and regulations over the years. And so I think this is going to be a real challenge to merge those two groups together and get the Uber team to work the way that Chris and Sterling and Drew, want their company to operate.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we're seeing, of course, is with the pandemic going on right now, it's obviously understandable that Lyft, Uber, and similar ride-sharing companies are not doing as well as they would be in non-pandemic times, less people taking rides and things like that. And so while it's easy to kind of look at this without that perspective in place to sort of go, okay, this is a decision that's being made based on the fact that Uber has had a troubled past with self-driving and maybe wants to look at a way to keep it going without keeping it going within its company. Do you think this is more of is this a thing they would have done? As much as you can tell, is this a thing that they would have done in non-pandemic times, or is part of this trying to protect the company, keep the company running by removing a part of the business that maybe costs a lot of money, but right now doesn't bring a whole lot in?
Yeah, I think this is something, that was going to happen sooner or later anyway. And frankly, I'm surprised it took this long. I think it's a matter of, trying to find somebody that would take it off their hands, rather than just shutting it down completely. They're actually back in 2018 after the fatal crash in Arizona, where one of Uber's test vehicles struck and killed a pedestrian. There was speculation at that time that Dara Khosrowshahi, the CEO at Uber, would actually shut down the whole ATG program. And in fact, to be honest, ever since it launched, I was always dubious about the idea of Uber trying to develop their own automated driving system. Back when Travis Kalanick was still the CEO, he often talked about automated driving being an existential threat to Uber's business. And that's why they got into it. But, the thing is, Uber's never had any experience in this area of developing vehicles, developing technologies, and developing their own automated driving system. To have robo-taxis on their platform, was always kind of antithetical to Uber's entire business model, which is, they were built around the idea of being not having any assets, being asset light, because they don't own any of the vehicles that are operated on their platform. They don't have to maintain them or put fuel in them. They just pay drivers to bring their own cars and pick up passengers. So if they had transitioned to, if they had developed their own system and transitioned to that, they would have been looking at spending tens of billions of dollars a year to buy or build vehicles and maintain those vehicles, insure them, put fuel or electricity in them, which would have, completely transformed them from an asset light company to an asset heavy company. And so I think it was always questionable whether they should even be in this business. And, given the relative lack of success they've had in actually developing the technology, I think it's clear now that they probably shouldn't have been. And they probably would have been better off to save the billions of dollars that they've poured into this group over the last several years, just cut them loose a long time ago and, just shut it down, because there's enough companies out there doing this that can bring vehicles to the Uber platform. Uber should just focus on what they do, which is the logistics and dispatch of connecting customers with available vehicles. And I think, before long, we're probably going to see Lyft probably end their program as well. They should. I don't think that these companies. This is not part of their core business. This is not something that they should be focusing on developing.
Right. One of the things you mentioned in the article is Uber shifting more to goods movement in the recent years. Are you speaking to Uber's Uber Eats platform, or is this something else other than that?
Everything, Uber Eats, freight, various deliveries. And actually, this is an interesting parallel to what's been going on at Aurora. Aurora has shifted their focus over the past year as well to goods delivery, as have a lot of the other companies in this space, to long haul trucking as a market for automated vehicles, but also local deliveries. Because when you're moving goods rather than people, it actually simplifies the problem of automated driving in a lot of ways. For when you are picking up passengers and taking them somewhere, passengers expect to have a smooth ride. They want to get there fairly quickly and at a low cost. And safety is more of an issue when you're carrying passengers than if you're carrying goods. I mean, it's obviously an issue. You don't want the vehicles crashing into stuff, but when you're carrying goods, it simplifies the problem a bit, because they're not going to be as picky about, if the ride is maybe a little jerky, or, if it takes a little bit longer to get somewhere because you've decided to take a route that may be a little bit longer but easier for the system to handle, maybe just doing nothing but taking right turns, like UPS and FedEx trucks typically do. They send their trucks out. They sequence the deliveries to minimize the number of left-hand turns that the delivery trucks have to make. So you can do things like that with a delivery vehicle that passengers, wouldn't necessarily tolerate. And, the unit economics are cheaper when you're delivering goods than if you've got a vehicle that has to carry passengers. So Aurora's been focusing on that. Uber's been moving more in that direction. And as we rely more on e-commerce, both before the pandemic and during the pandemic, it's a growing market for delivery of all kinds, both long haul and local deleries.
Yeah, I guess I didn't realize that Uber was doing freight. They've been doing it for quite a few years.
It's not a huge part of their business, but Uber and other companies that are trying to use up any excess capacity that's in the trucks. Because if you get a truck that's driving across the country, an 18-wheeler driving across the country, if you've got room for another 1,000 pounds of cargo in that trailer, you might as well fill it up. If it's going to the same place you are, you might as well put it in there. That's just extra revenue for the operator of that truck.
Yeah, indeed. Now, you mentioned in your Forbes piece, just the sheer fact that Uber is shedding a lot of its business units really with the ultimate goal of reaching profitability. When I read that, it actually kind of reminded me of Google to a certain degree and their kind of experimental division, where for a long time they were throwing everything against the wall, and now it's kind of like, actually, we need to focus on things that are actually going to make us money. And I don't even think they're anywhere close to that as far as that division is concerned. But is it working? Does it seem like it's working for Uber to be doing this? Like at this point, they've shed a lot. So is that working for them?
Yeah, I think I think it will work in the long term. And I think, right now they're still, during the pandemic, they're still being weighed down by the loss of revenue from the ride hailing business. But I think long term, it will absolutely help. I mean, they sold off their micromobility business, the jump bikes and scooters. They sold that off to Lime. I think it was to Lime. And over the last several years, they've sold off some of their regional, even some of the regional ride-hailing businesses around the world to other companies. Like a few years ago, they sold off the China business to Didi. But in each of these cases, what they've done is similar to what they've done with Aurora. When they sell off a business unit, they end up keeping a stake in the company they sell it to. So they still have a piece of that pie, but it's not directly costing them money in terms of operational expense on a day-to-day basis. So, if that business does work out and it starts to make money, then they can start to benefit from that, but they don't have to continuously pay for it. So that's just like the paying for the self-driving car unit. They don't have to pay all the bills now for that. But if Aurora does succeed, they will benefit from that and gain some of the profits from that.
All right. Well, Sam, Abuelsamid, I want to thank you so much for helping us kind of come to an understanding about what's going on here with Uber and with Aurora, and frankly, the state of automated driving right now, and sort of how Uber's payment, but sort of investment all played into that, because that was the part I was a little confused about. So I do appreciate it. If folks want to follow you online and check out all the great work that you do, where do they go to do that?
Well, my day job is as a principal analyst with Guidehouse Insights. So you can find us at guidehouseinsights.com. We do market research and strategy for a wide variety of clients. I also write, as you mentioned, at Forbes. I do some stuff 1-0 for our friend Megan Maroney. I do the podcast at Wheel Bearings with my friends Dan Roth and Rebecca Lindland. And you can just Google my name. You'll find all those places.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Sam.
Always a pleasure.
Indeed. Good to see you. All right. Coming up, some guy on the internet wrote about moving from Google to creating their own cloud. We'll talk about that. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by LastPass. Companies face cybersecurity threats no matter where employees are working, all right? Everybody's working at home. Maybe even more now because everybody's working at home. There's a lot more opportunity now out there, whether they're connecting from an office or from home. The risk of cyber attacks, things like data loss, data breaches, are something companies really need to plan for and actually work specifically to mitigate for. So a solid cybersecurity strategy is arguably more important while employees are working from home, just because there's so many more factors to deal with. Wi-Fi networks, shared devices, all that stuff might be outside of the direct control of IT. And that's why LastPass is so crucial to protecting your business at all times, not just right now, but in the future when we all return to whatever normal is. LastPass is going to be just as effective and helpful then too. IT and security leaders can take back control of password security. They'll have the control that they need from a central dashboard from which to monitor the activity. Businesses can customize admin privileges, and that's to ensure that any given admin has only the right level of access. And so no matter your organization's source of truth, LastPass integrates to onboard users, sync groups, and revoke access. You can access security scores and dark web monitoring to see real-time readouts of your business's password hygiene, and you're provided alerts to employees when credentials may actually be at risk. For every employee, you can view their password scores. That score can be a little a little sad to read at times. I know sometimes I see my score, I'm like, oh man, okay, I got to go in there and improve my score a little bit, change the passwords, get that up. But it's nice. It's a nice tool because it gives you an immediate access to see how your password health is on a macro level. You can gain access to shared accounts, monitor group memberships, and a whole lot more. LastPass's zero-knowledge security model protects everyone from the individual user to the biggest organization. They actually allow employees to go passwordless while giving them access to the tools that they need to work. LastPass ensures complete security in the cloud. They've got strong encryption algorithms, local-only encryption, multi-factor authentication. I love using LastPass multi-factor authentication. IT leaders need to invest now in upgrading or adding security technologies that make remote work safer and more productive. And LastPass is the best place to start. So don't wait until the end of the year to get strong security. Start solidifying your cybersecurity strategy with the award-winning LastPass today. Go to lastpass.com/twit to find out how they can help you. That's lastpass.com/twit. We thank LastPass for their support of Tech News Weekly and the TWiT network.
All right, it is time for our stories of the week. And this is funny. This morning, I was looking for a story of the week, and I was, scrolling through Twitter as one is wont to do for some horrible reason. Joking.
Be careful.
You know what? There is still some goodness on Twitter, I've got to say. It's little pockets of it. Anyway, so I was scrolling through Twitter and I saw this headline. Google has finally convinced me to create my own cloud. And I was like, oh, that's going to be my story of the week. I know it because that sounds very interesting. And so I sort of put that in my brain, and I was chatting with my dear co-host, Jason Howell, and he started talking about a piece that he had worked on that was about him switching to his own cloud from using Google's services. And lo and behold, this article that I was making my story of the week was one written by my co-host, Jason Howell. And
that's really weird, Micah.
So I read through it, and it was kind of exactly where I expected you were going to go, and what you are currently working through to try and get everything set up, because you kind of talk about how Google Play Music has become YouTube Music, and there's good stuff about Google Play Music that you don't get with YouTube Music, and YouTube Music seems to be focused more on things that you didn't quite want, and having a place for you to store the music that you've collected over the years, and how that's been a big issue for you. And so now you're in the process of moving that all over to sort of your own Plex instance with the help of a set-top box. And I think this is really interesting just on its own. For me, the good thing that I will say about Apple in this instance is Apple's method for storing your music. It's for the longest time given you a place with an Apple Music subscription to bring in the music that you own. And so it gets uploaded to the cloud, and then it gets downloaded to all of your devices every time you log into Apple Music on any new device. So nice. Your personal music goes right along with everything else. So I don't have that pain point. But certainly on the photos side of things, again, I'm good to go for now with Apple's photo library, but I like to have my photos in other places as well, just in case something were to go wrong. Now, with that, Apple has within certain bounds, has charged me from the get-go because once you have a certain number of photos, then you have to pay for more storage to store the rest of them. So unlike Google, right, which at one point offered this for free, what they called high resolution or full resolution photos that you could store for free, then after a point, then you would have to pay for it. But this is, I guess because Apple kind of started with charging things, they can not have to walk that back now, which is what Google is having to do. But I also have my photos, all of my photos in Google Photos. I also have them in Amazon's photo library. And back in the day when, what was it? I can't think of the service now, but there was a third service that I used to always just have them stored there as well. I like having them in those different places. But one of the things that I've done, and you mentioned this in your article, is thinking about getting a network attached storage system set up. I haven't gone all out by getting a Synology or a QNAP system, but I do have a Western Digital MyCloud, and it essentially it is a network attached storage that is meant for consumers, meaning that it takes the kind of guesswork and network management and all that more difficult stuff out of being able to create your own personal cloud that you can store photos, music, and everything else you want, movies, everything in it. And you can also install Plex on it, and it does it all. But like I said, it makes it easier where you're not doing a bunch of routing tables and stuff like that to get it to work. So in reading this, that was the recommendation that I was going to have for you, was to check out the WD MyCloud system, because I used to have one that was smaller, and it was great. And then I needed more space. And so I ended up upgrading to the newer version that lets me actually swap in hard drives. And it's been fantastic for those things that I think you would want. And yes, that has become the third place now. So along with my, actually the fourth place. So Apple Photos has my photos, Amazon has my photos, Google right now has my photos, and then the fourth place is my own personal cloud through the network attached storage. And yeah, all it does is upload them. You know, it's not this beautiful presentation, and it doesn't have all the cool features that the other ones do, but I know that they're there in case everything else is to let me down. They're available there. But yeah, anybody who's kind of scrambling to figure out what comes next, now that what comes next, soon you'll see. Google has changed things. Sorry, yeah, there's a little song break there. You should definitely go read Jason's article on Debugger.
Oh, thank you, Micah. That's so funny that you were scouring for it, and then I put that link in there, and you're like, "Holy cow! That was what I was going to pick."
Now,
I felt very lucky.
Which of my iMore articles is your choice for Story of the Week? I'm just kidding.
Let me see here. Did you write an iMore article about Facebook and Oculus products? And it actually wasn't iMore, it was TechCrunch?
Oh, yes, that was no.
Next time. I'll repay the favor. Let's see here. Facebook is being investigated. Yes, for antitrust, on antitrust charges here in the U.S., but also in other places around the world, including Germany. This story caught my attention because yesterday when I saw that the charges had gone public, and then there was a PDF that you could actually read through the charges here in the U.S. And it reads like a novel, like it's actually really well written. The first thing that I did was a Command F and search for the term Oculus, because I was like, I appreciate that all this stuff is happening, and it'll be interesting to see where this lands. But the thing that really impacts me in this moment in my life, like right now, is the fact that I need a Facebook account in order to use the Quest 2, and I don't want to. I don't want to have to do that. And so I was kind of, selfishly hoping that I would find Oculus in that. But of course, it was nowhere to be found. It has nothing to do with Oculus. Well, in Germany, it does. Germany's Federal Cartel Office, that's the FCO, is investigating Facebook on antitrust charges related specifically to the fact that the company requires a Facebook login in order to use the Quest 2 and, Oculus products going forward. It says linking virtual reality products and the group's social network in this way could constitute a prohibited abuse of dominance by Facebook. And this is not the only, direction that Germany is investigating Facebook on antitrust charges. The FCO is also pursuing similar concerns with how Facebook uses user data for ad profiling in what, I think they use abusive market dominating ways as one of the terms of that. So it's not the only way that they're investigating Facebook, but it sure is one way that just kind of ticks me off that I have to have a Facebook account. Like, yes, I do, and I will. I'm actually reviewing the Quest 2 for Hands on Tech. So this Monday, my review for the Oculus Quest 2 will be on Hands on Tech. And I ultimately through the review, I talk about how great the hardware is in many ways, and just what a like unfortunate punctuation it is to have the requirement of the Facebook login, also attached to this excellent hardware.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was super happy to. So for the longest time, I thought about doing VR, wanted to get a VR set, but I did not want to have to buy a computer to do it. And then the Oculus Quest, the first one, came around, and I thought about it again and again. But I'm not a big gamer, and so I thought that is a big purchase to make and then not use very often. And so it just was outside of my willingness to spend that much money to get a thing that maybe I wouldn't use a lot. So I kind of kept holding off. Then the Oculus Quest kind of sold out for a while. And then it was back in stock. I'd set up little in-stock reminders about it and would occasionally go and sort of glance at the screen, and the screen would glance back at me, and I'd glance at the screen, and we would have this standoff, like, are you going to buy me or not? And I always ended up not buying. But then the Oculus Quest 2 came out or was announced rather, and it was pretty much the stuff that the Quest offered, but it cost less money. And so I pre-ordered on day one, and was able to get one as soon as, the shipping happened. So I've had one for a while now. And I've talked a lot about it on Smart Tech Today with my co-host, Matthew Cassinelli, because he got one as well. And while I love the fact that I got it, there was a part of the purchase that left me feeling kind of icky because I did not want to support Facebook. And I didn't want to, feel like I had to use my Facebook account to use this hardware device, especially given the fact that the only reason I have a Facebook account is because of a ridiculous situation where some advertiser was using my likeness on Facebook to put out, and I've talked a lot about this before, so I'm not going to go into it. But yeah, there was an advertisement that used my likeness and someone else's likeness, and we didn't know each other, but it was a little defamatory in the headline about what it was. And I had not just deactivated, but had completely deleted my Facebook account. But I had to create an all new one and get Facebook again in order to report it and say, hey, this is my face, and you're not going to say this about me because this is not about me. And so then, I was able to get those ads removed from Facebook. But that's the only reason that I had a Facebook account again. And so using that in order to use this piece of hardware that I paid a lot of money for was really frustrating. And then on top of that, I'm not using any of the Facebook stuff anyway. And of course, Facebook would make the argument that, well, the way that you connect with people and doodle-doodle-doo is through Facebook. So technically, yes, you are. But what I mean is the Facebook services are not things that I'm using. I pay for third-party games and have played those, not ones that are made by Facebook. So that's been very frustrating to me. And yeah, I wish that, or I hope that there will be some attention paid to Facebook and the Oculus issue. Whether that's the case, I don't know. But I mean, because even with an Apple device, you wouldn't enjoy the experience without having an Apple ID. But you could use the phone without having an Apple ID. You could still use the phone. And so the idea that it's almost it's a digital lock on my device, that's icky and that's not cool. And I don't like it.
Yeah,
so I'm right there with
that's
you.
Exactly how I feel. It does feel like a digital lock that it just feels unfair. Like how I could compare it is, when I set up a new MacBook Pro, let's say, it asks me to log into my, iCloud account or whatever. And very often I don't, because I just don't really use a lot of those features. And so I'm like, whatever. I can make that choice. I can use this laptop for everything that a laptop is usable for. Same case could be made for VR. Like, I suppose there is the aspect of, Facebook's kind of the graph of people and players on the same network. If you want to do multiplayer stuff, maybe that has to route through Facebook, and they have to have some sort of identity solution in order to do that, perhaps. But I could still choose to like have that just be a VR, like a solo VR device, and those things just like I don't use those things if I really had the option to. It's just unfortunate. It's also like I also feel a little stung to. And I fully take, like I realized that I did this to myself. But when I was setting this up, the Quest 2, I was a little distracted. I can't remember exactly what was going on, but I was setting this up while I was doing some work. Mm-hmm. And it got to the point to where it said, you need a Facebook account in order to log into this thing. And, so I had to like come up with a Facebook account because I didn't have one. And in the process of logging into a Facebook account on my phone, I didn't think about the fact that my Oculus app was already logged in on my phone as well. And so what then happened is what I didn't want to happen. I wanted my Facebook account to be separate from my Oculus account because I also have the Quest 1. And I just wanted to, the rules were that if you had the older Quest and you had an old Oculus account, you could still use that unconnected to Facebook for a couple of years. But because I was logged into the Oculus app on my phone and I logged into Facebook on that phone, it automatically linked them. And so now it's like, oh, well, now all your purchases that you made are tied to this Facebook account that I created on the fly. That like, if I knew that, I never would have done that because like I didn't think of this Facebook account as like a permanent like thing that would live with me forever. I just thought of it as this is what I need in order to play my Quest 2. Now all my games are tied to it. And as you know, if I delete that account, all of my games that I've purchased go away. And there's no way to get them back. And that's where I start to look at these investigations and I start to go, that's really like, that doesn't make any sense to me. That makes no sense that you could just suddenly take away all those purchases because I don't want to have a social network account with you. That doesn't make any sense. And it pisses me off.
I agree. Hear, sir. Hear.
All right. Whew. Step off of this soapbox here. Here, let me step off. Okay, good. We have reached the end of Tech News Weekly for this week anyways. Tech News Weekly publishes every Thursday at twit.tv/TNW. That's where you can go to subscribe to the show in audio and video formats. Jump out to YouTube, subscribe there. We don't care. Just subscribe and then you'll get them and you don't have to think about it.
Boom. He said it perfectly. And of course, you should follow us on social media. We are at TWiT on Twitter, at twit.tv on Instagram, at TwitTalk on TikTok. And if you want to tweet at me, I'm at Micah Sargent. And I'm pretty much at Micah Sargent on all the social media networks. Later today, I'll have an episode of Hands on iOS out that's it's just quick tips. When someone is telling you, hey, force quit an app, what does that mean? When someone's telling you restart your phone, what does that mean? How do you do it? It's just those simple troubleshooting steps that will help you when that tech-savvy member of your family is telling you, do this thing, and you're going, I don't really know what you mean when you say that. So hopefully that'll help you out. What about you, Jason?
You can find me at Jason Howell, writing on Medium's Debugger at Jason Howell as well. And then twit.tv/HOA. This week's episode just went up. It's Gboard. So that's Google's keyboard app. Some tips and tricks for that because we type with our smartphones so often, right? And it's probably the thing I enjoy least on my smartphone. I hate typing, especially long things on the phone. And thankfully, Gboard has some functions in there that you may have activated, you may not, that actually make it a little bit easier. That kind of takes some of the time away from punching out a long diatribe. So twit.tv/HOA. Big thanks to everybody at the studio for helping us do the show each and every week. John, who has his work cut out for him in the edit today. Burke for setting everything up behind the scenes. And, well, you for watching and listening. We'll see you next time on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.
Want more twit? Well, check out Smart Tech Today. It's at twit.tv/STT. It's the show where Matthew Casanelli and I cover everything there is to know about smart tech. It's automation, it's connected devices, it's smart home, it's all those goodies and so much more. We get the news, we get the latest devices, we do reviews, everything. You gotta check it out, twit.tv/STT for Smart Tech Today.